For 13 long years, she carried a crime she never committed. The world called her a murderer, while the real monster walked free. But when freedom finally came, she didn't seek forgiveness. She sought vengeance. Calm, elegant, and merciless. This is not a story of justice. It's a story of a woman who learned that sometimes angels must become devils to make things right. The heroine, Geum-ja, was once a bright high school student in Korea, but due to misconduct at school, she became pregnant. Her boyfriend heartlessly abandoned her. Helpless, she turned to a teacher she knew, Mr. Choi. She begged him for help. But what Geum-ja didn't know was Mr. Choi was a perverted serial killer, targeting only school children, those weak and defenseless little ones. Every time he moved to a new school, a new case followed. He would kidnap a child and record their terrified cries, then send the video to demand ransom from the parents. Once he received the money, he'd kill the victim, then move to the next school to start again. Those recordings became the last images of the murdered children. Mr. Choi agreed to help Geum-ja, but on one condition: she must carry a child to a location he specified. Naive and desperate, she didn't think much. But once she completed the errand, Choi did something she would never forget. Annoyed by the child's crying, he suffocated the boy to death. And she became the only witness to the kidnapping and murder. She became Mr. Choi's scapegoat. On the day she was arrested, angry parents surrounded her and beat her. They wanted to tear Geum-ja apart. Their hateful curses filled her with unbearable humiliation. What broke her even more was on a distant hillside, she saw Mr. Choi smiling eerily at her with her baby girl in his arms. That moment crushed Geum-ja's soul completely. And soon, very soon, Geum-ja began her 20-year prison sentence. Every day in prison, she was filled with hatred. She sat in the corner, crying helplessly. One day, the police called her to reenact the crime scene. Overwhelmed with fury, she violently attacked the mannequin used as the victim. Even though it wasn't human, she tried to suffocate it with a pillow. Outside, reporters filmed the scene in a frenzy. She didn't stop until the mannequin's head flew off. Then, standing before the cameras, Geum-ja faced the reporters and the police who arrested her, venting all her rage and resentment. It was clear she wanted the world to remember her. That very scene was seen on TV by a famous pastor. He soon visited Geum-ja in prison, believing that beneath her demonic face hid the soul of an angel. His arrival brought a faint light into her darkness. For the first time, Geum-ja felt hope. Gradually, she began to change. In prison, she became almost a different person. She started caring for the elderly inmates, helping everyone around her. She even donated one of her kidneys. Gradually, she made many friends. Everyone felt warmth from her kindness. They began to call her kind-hearted Geum-ja. Because of her good behavior, her sentence was reduced by 7 years. On the day of her release, the pastor came to meet her. He handed her a block of white tofu to celebrate a symbol that from now on, her life would be as pure as tofu, free from sin. But Geum-ja, now a changed woman, threw the tofu to the ground, and that shattered the pastor's faith entirely. Mind your own business. After leaving, Geum-ja sought out the friends she had made in prison. First was a woman named Yeon-jin. Before prison, she worked as a hostess. Exploited harshly by her boss, she seized a chance and strangled him. On her first day behind bars, she heard that in the prison she was headed to, there was a radiant angel who could wash away one's sins. Though she was bullied by the prison tyrant at first, Geum-ja later taught her how to mourn her past life. Grateful for Geum-ja's kindness, when Geum-ja came to her, she helped with all her heart, even offering Geum-ja a place to stay. Yeon-jin felt Geum-ja had changed a lot, but it didn't surprise her. They both knew Geum-ja had a revenge plan. The next day, Geum-ja went to the home of the boy she had been accused of killing and begged his parents for forgiveness. When they refused, she cut off one of her fingers to atone, but then all the money she had earned in prison had to be spent on surgery to reattach it. So Geum-ja knew she had to survive first. She found a job at a bakery. The boy working in back, Sugun, froze at his first glance of her. He'd never seen anyone so beautiful. With work secured, Geum-ja headed to her next stop, the woman who had received her donated kidney. Before prison, the couple were a notorious duo, but were arrested together during a robbery. The woman loved her husband so much that prison life made her miserable, and she gradually developed kidney failure. It was Geum-ja who gave her a kidney. The woman was endlessly grateful to her. So when Geum-ja came to them, the couple were more than willing to help perfect her revenge plan. Geum-ja then produced what she'd prepared long ago, pages from a scripture torn out and pieced together, forming a diagram of a gun's components. That scripture was given to her in prison by an elderly inmate who needed full-time care. Everyone knew Geum-ja wanted revenge, and since she was kind-hearted Geum-ja, The old man hand-drew a gun blueprint for her. Yes, he hand-drew a gun blueprint for her, hoping it could help. After giving the gun blueprint to the couple, Gum Ja quietly headed home. But as soon as she reached the staircase, she ran into the pastor again. The sight of him made her flinch in shock. The pastor approached her and said, "Gum Ja, you've changed so much. You don't seem like the same person anymore." He wanted to start over with her, to bring her back to the church. But Gum Ja calmly pulled out a book, a Buddhist text she had begun studying. The man looked utterly betrayed. The next day, Gum Ja officially began work at the bakery. But on her very first day, she ran into the detective who once handled her case. He had never believed she was the murderer and still wanted to find evidence to clear her name. But since her daughter was still in Mr. Choi's hands, Gum Ja could only insist she was guilty, demanding the police arrest her quickly. Their meeting was filled with regret. Working at the bakery, Gum Ja simply needed a way to earn money so she could search for her daughter. She spent her days working and her nights searching. The place she visited most often was the orphanage, but the staff repeatedly refused to help, claiming they couldn't reveal adoption records. All they told her was that the girl had been adopted, nothing more. So one night after work, Gum Ja secretly broke into the orphanage. She searched through the records. Heaven helps the determined, she finally found her daughter's file. But by then, the girl had been adopted by an Australian couple. Without hesitation, Gum Ja went straight to her boss at the bakery. She asked for 3 months' salary in advance enough to fly to Australia to see her daughter. The owner initially refused, but Gum Ja ignored him, writing her bank account number on paper. She knew he would send the money eventually. They'd met long ago. The man had once been in a car accident in Tokyo and broke his leg. Afterward, he took a job at a prison. One day, by chance, he tasted a cake made by Gum Ja and was astonished that such simple ingredients could become something so delicious. That taste inspired him to open his bakery. Meanwhile, Gum Ja, in order to advance her revenge plan, knew she still needed help. So she turned her eyes toward Sugun, the boy at the bakery, because he was the same age as the murdered child. If that boy hadn't died, he'd be about Sugun's age now. To ease her lingering guilt, Gum Ja shared an intimate night with Sugun. She also told him her story, how one day she came home and found her daughter missing. Mr. Choi called, ordering her to take the blame, or her daughter would die. So in the end, the story became one where a kidnapper kidnapped another kidnapper's child. Hearing it all, Sugun finally understood how wrong Gum Ja had been. Meanwhile, Gum Ja began studying English to prepare for meeting her daughter. She even wrote a letter to the adoptive parents, and when she arrived at their home, she read it aloud to them. The foreign couple listened in shock, moved, and speechless. The little girl, seeing her real mother for the first time, felt the deep pull of blood connection. That night, as they were going to sleep, the girl rolled out a globe and made a rebellious decision. She asked, "Can you take me to Korea?" Hearing that, Gum Ja immediately exploded. Absolutely not. She couldn't face the adoptive parents if she did. They would never agree to it anyway. They argued fiercely. Until the next day, the little girl grabbed a knife and pressed it to her neck, threatening her adoptive parents to give in. Gum Ja knelt down helplessly, in despair. In the end, the girl followed her mother back to Korea. As soon as they arrived, Gum Ja was contacted by the bandit couple to pick up the gun. They warned her the gun's range was short. She'd have to shoot from close range. But its power was immense. After that, Gum Ja began traveling with her daughter, An. She bought her the puppy she always wanted. Feeling guilty as a mother, she tried to shower her daughter with love. Together they drove into the countryside, eventually arriving at an abandoned school. There, Sugun began teaching the girl Korean, while Gum Ja chose the place as the site for her revenge. Meanwhile, Mr. Choi was teaching at a kindergarten. The term beast in human clothing fit him perfectly. One moment he was a smiling teacher, the next, at home, his eyes turned lifeless. He glanced down at his watch, checking the time. He immediately stood up. He walked up behind his wife. We won't dwell on what happened next. His wife, Ahwa, had once been one of Gum Ja's fellow inmates and a target of the prison bully. That bully was no ordinary inmate. She dominated the prison like no one else. Before prison, she murdered her husband and his mistress, and even cannibalized them afterward. When police came to arrest her, many were too scared to approach. In prison, she kept tormenting other inmates. Every newcomer fell under her tyranny and was forced to do revolting things. Ahwa was one of them. At night, when the bully slept, Ahwa had to stay awake the whole night, fanning away mosquitoes by her bedside. If a single mosquito bit the bully, Ahwa would suffer endless brutal punishment. All of this was witnessed by Gum Ja. So to get rid of the bully, she launched a 3-year effort to break her down. Whenever the bully ate, Gimja added bleach to her soup, spoon-feeding it to the unsuspecting tyrant. Day after day, the bully eventually died. That act by Gimja instantly won her admiration from countless inmates, and she inherited the bully's nickname, the Witch. Back to the present, Ahwa sought out the newly freed Gyeomja. Her long-suffering endurance had been at Gyeomja's urging. But today, Ahwa came because she couldn't stand Mr. Choi any longer. They had to act tonight. Hearing this, Gyeomja said, little unaware that the pastor, feeling betrayed by her, was seeking revenge. He secretly photographed their meeting and handed the pictures to Mr. Choi. Seeing the two women in the photos, his own wife and Gyeomja, Mr. Choi felt he'd been played. He paid the pastor a sum in thanks for the tip. Meanwhile, as Ahwa headed home, she received a call from Mr. Choi. She asked if he'd eaten, yet she had drugged the meal. When she learned he hadn't, she passed the news to Gyeomja. But she didn't know that back at her place, Mr. Choi had hired 2 hitmen to await her return. By the time she got home, Ahwa woke up to find herself tied to a chair. Across from her, Mr. Choi calmly ate his dinner, gazing at his captive like a predator with its prey. Though her face was bruised beyond recognition, Ahwa remained unafraid, because she knew Mr. Choi had already eaten the food she'd drugged. At the same time, the 2 hitmen who had taken her down were waiting in the car outside, prepared with sedatives for Gyeomja's arrival. Meanwhile, Gyeomja and her daughter had no idea that danger was closing in. Still, cautious as ever, Gyeomja sensed something off, but brushed it aside. She turned to leave, only for the men in the car to lunge out suddenly, trying to drag the 2 of them inside. Gyeomja fought back with all her strength. She knew they were stronger, so she focused on not being pulled into the car. Then, seizing the right moment, she pulled out her gun. One shot one man down. The other panicked, grabbing her daughter and backing away in fear. But Gyeomja no longer cared about her own safety. Step by step, she advanced on him. She knew the range was short, so she waited until she was close enough before firing. After dealing with both men, Gyeomja went to find Ahwa at Mr. Choi's house. By then, he was unconscious on the table. She picked up a spoon and tested his reaction. He was completely out cold. 13 years had passed, and now she stood over the man who had ruined her life. Rage burned within her, to the breaking point. But she couldn't kill him yet, that would be too merciful. So she grabbed a pair of scissors and hacked at his hair, venting her fury. Then she and Ahwa tied him up tightly, and together they drove to the abandoned school. When Mr. Choi regained consciousness, he was bound hand and foot. The unfamiliar surroundings terrified him. Gyeomja's moment of vengeance had finally arrived. She told Ahwa to take her daughter home first, then faced Mr. Choi alone. She pressed the gun to his eye. It was a moment she had imagined countless times. Mr. Choi trembled uncontrollably, but Gyeomja didn't pull the trigger. Instead, she made him feel it, the dread of not knowing when death would come. Then suddenly, his phone began to ring. Gyeomja picked it up and hung up without a word. But when she noticed the charm hanging from Mr. Choi's phone, Gyeomja couldn't hold back anymore. She saw that it contained a keepsake from the little boy Mr. Choi had killed, along with several other trinkets. It proved he'd murdered more than just that one child. Gyeomja removed the marble that belonged to the boy, then set the charm down in front of Mr. Choi. She yanked the gag from his mouth, dragged him by his tie, and threw him to the floor. She went to strangle him, practically reenacting the frenzy with which he'd killed the boy. Then she dragged him, thrashing him across the floor, punching and kicking him. She was venting years of pent-up hatred. When she'd emptied it all out, she hauled him upright again. He tried to say something, but Gyeomja slipped a mask over his mouth, clearly unwilling to hear a word from him, only his screams. She fired twice, shattering both his feet to keep him from escaping. Then she left the place, calling the detective from back then at the same time to report that Mr. Choi had also killed several other children. Afterward, Gyeomja went to Mr. Choi's home to search for evidence of his crimes. Sure enough, before long she found 4 tapes under his desk. She immediately fed them into the player. The 3 of them then sat on the sofa, listening to the screams on TV. The detective in the middle said nothing, his clenched fists turning white. So Gyeomja used the police channels to summon the families of the 4 victims so they could watch the footage of Mr. Choi torturing and killing their children to make them fully grasp the kind of demon they were about to kill. As the screen kept cutting, the scenes grew more and more brutal, and the parents watching broke down in sobs. At that point, Gyeomja explained to them Mr. Choi's method of operation. Wherever he went, he took a job at a school, then planned a kidnapping. He never targeted students from his own class, which is why he wasn't discovered. After each job, once he'd extorted the ransom, he killed the child and moved on to the next place. The child's voice heard during negotiations was pre-recorded because by that time Mr. Choi had already killed them to prevent any complications. In his mind, only the dead were safe, so he never left any survivors. She then told everyone present there were two choices before them. They could choose for themselves. 1. Hand Mr. Choi over to the law. The other, a faster, more humane option, was to act now and vent all their rage on him here and now. Someone below asked whether Mr. Choi had any children himself and what he wanted all that money for. Guillaume explained he was likely infertile, and all the ransom money he extorted was stored in the bank, apparently to buy a yacht. That answer left everyone completely speechless. So by nightfall, the group began discussing how exactly to deal with Mr. Choi, whether to hand him to the court or handle it themselves. Most thought the court would be too lenient, but a few couldn't bring themselves to kill murder was too much to bear. For ordinary people, it was almost unimaginable. So in the end, they decided to take a vote. Strangely, 80% agreed to carry out the punishment themselves, so the minority had no choice but to join in. Everything would be recorded on video, so no one could later betray the others. At that point, Guillaume stood up. She declared that after 13 years of planning, she had caught Mr. Choi, and if anyone dared to call the police, she would not spare them either. The room fell silent. Then they began to decide attack together, or one by one. One woman spoke up. "This kind of thing needs privacy. It's like ordering food at a restaurant. Everyone has a different taste." Another woman added, "Doing it all at once would be too easy on him." They began discussing how each wanted to torture Mr. Choi. Every detail of it Guillaume broadcast through the speakers, so Mr. Choi could hear everything. He now knew clearly his countdown to death had begun. Finally, they drew lots to decide the order. Each put on a raincoat and picked a weapon to use on him. The woman who went first was trembling all over. After all, something like this took enormous psychological strength. Soon, it was her turn to begin the punishment. At the doorway, the detective showed her how to hold the knife properly so she wouldn't cut herself. When she finally stood before Mr. Choi, she couldn't help asking him why he did all those things. She walked out, covered in blood. Everyone outside turned to look at her in shock. Their faces were pale and tense. Then, one by one, they lined up to enter and take their turn torturing Mr. Choi. The second group went in together, 4 people. When Mr. Choi saw the 4 appear before him, panic spread across his face. Then they leapt on him like hungry wolves, tearing into him in a frenzy of vengeance. By the time they left, a pool of blood had already gathered beneath his feet. Next, a man entered, wielding an axe, but his daughter reminded him one grandmother hadn't gone in yet, so they couldn't finish him off completely. When the 2 came out, they had merely vented their fury. Their raincoats were soaked scarlet with blood. Then the last one, the old grandmother, entered, calm as ever. She walked slowly to where Mr. Choi lay. A moment later, as if nothing had happened, she quietly returned to the group. When Guillaume and the others came over, they found a pair of scissors embedded in Mr. Choi's throat. Once Mr. Choi was dead, everyone began cleaning up the scene. They collected the blood first, then folded up the plastic sheeting. Finally, under the detective's instruction, they all gathered for a group photo. And with that, the story came to an end. Sometimes, the only way to face violence is with violence itself. Perhaps that is what true revenge means.